Oh boy, did I touch some feelers with that last video. Just because I put Sticker Star in C, I didn't think it was that bad. It's like y'all are allowed to dislike it if you want. Just like I'm allowed to say it's okay. I am perfectly willing to talk about and defend my opinions on that, but I'm not gonna change my opinions just because some people hate it that much. And it's not like I said it was a good game either. But if you're expecting me to just change stuff based on that, yeah, that's not gonna happen and you're in the wrong place. That aside, let's talk about some Wario. Maybe today we'll get forklift certified. Anyways, I'll be talking about both the Land and the Ware games, which are two very different concepts, but there's not a huge amount of either games to do two lists for them, so we'll just go it all at once. And to start things off, the Wario Woods games, these were not like any other Wario games in this series. They were Tetris-y type falling block puzzle games, which I will say right now my opinion against these will be somewhat biased because I don't particularly like those types of games. I did kind of like Panel du Pont / Puzzle League, but that's kind of its own thing. I will say they did do a little bit to make it different from just another Tetris clone by having you play as a character moving stuff around the bottom instead of just grabbing things as they fall and dropping them. And occasionally getting attacked by Wario can kind of mess you up. Although honestly I'd say this is more of a Toad's game than a Wario game. There isn't much of a difference between the two versions, I don't think, apart from just one looking and sounding better. But either way, I'd say they're just D tier, they're nothing special. I'll give them credit for trying to do something a little bit different, but again, at the day, they're just more falling block puzzle games. There is another game called Mario and Wario, which I'm not going to talk too much about, because I feel this is more of a Mario game than a Wario one, since Wario just really only appears in cutscenes, and he takes the villain act, which, by the way, I don't think they really knew what they were doing with Wario when they first introduced him in Mario Land 2. Because in that game, he was a straight-up villain, as was he in Mario and Wario, and kind of in the Picross games. But once they started doing the Land games, he kind of became more of an anti-hero than a villain, even though he does occasionally do some actual villainous stuff in the sports games cutscenes. But we're not talking about those. So his first true game, Wario Land, also known as Super Mario Land 3. This is a bit of a mixed bag. They did do some things to separate it from just being another Mario game, but the hat mechanics was a bit janky. There was a decent amount of content though, but it's a bit hard to rank this one. Part of me would say a high C or a low B. I'm going to say low B on that one. Especially partially because the Virtual Boy pseudo-sequel was pretty much everything that game was, but a little bit better. A little bit better level design, better bosses, a little bit better balancing while being more challenging at the same time. Though I don't particularly like the fact that on both of these versions, the amount of coins you get determines the ending you get, and some of those minigames are just not fun. This is probably my biggest gripe for this one, but either way, better than the first game, but sadly enough, that's probably the best game the Virtual Boy ever had. Anyways, Wario Land 2. This is a bit of a step down for me, since it's still a technical platformer, but they kind of changed the mechanics heavily. You can't actually die anymore, which I guess does give it a bit more standout-ish than being a regular Mario game, but the problem is a lot of the states he goes into are just really not fun to control, as are the puzzles it revolves around. The level design was okay, the music was okay. I like the fact there's a lot of different paths you can take and multiple endings, though some of them are really tedious to get to, and you probably wouldn't think of if you didn't have a guide. I think it's okay. It's nothing special. It's not as good as the first two games. Of course, the first two games were just pretty alright as well. I don't know. I just really did not have much fun with Wario Land 2 and 3's formula compared to most of the other games. But I will take it over the next one, which is Wario Land 3. Oh boy, this took most of the issues Wario Land 2 had and doubled and tripled down on them, and not in a good way. A lot of the environmental puzzles are really, really tedious. You're constantly getting put into negative states. The map is a pain in the ass to navigate, and you're constantly having to figure out where you're supposed to go, because despite the more openness of it, there is an order. And having to swap between day and night just makes it even more tedious. I gotta be honest, I do not like this one. Thankfully, you can completely ignore it because the story is just like, oh hey, here's this thing that happens to Wario, and at the end of it, oh hey, none of it really matters because it was an entirely different world and it will never come up again. I know a lot of people did like this one, but for me, it's just, I really did not enjoy it. I'd honestly rather play the Wario's Woods games, and that's saying something. I played this through from start to finish once, and I will never do it again. Baffles me that this is the one Wario Land game they brought to the NSO. So, I'll put that in D tier and spare it from F because it is at least functional, and I know I'll get flamed again by putting it in F. Not that I really care that much, but I don't really want to listen to a bunch of bitching. Okay, next we got 4. They took everything about the first 3 games and the Virtual Boy games, threw it in a freaking bin, keeping it as still a technical platformer, and boy, was that the right thing to do. The level design is great. The new mechanics can be a bit tedious to learn at first, but once you get past that really dull tutorial level, it's easy to just pick it up as you go. The music is great. Visuals are pretty good for the system. Honestly, I really don't have much complaints for this game. My only 2 big issues is the fact that it is pretty short, and I don't like the fact that you have to play these dumb minigames before the bosses just to power yourself up and give you a better chance, which you kind of need to do for the final boss, especially to get the good ending. But you know what? Despite those flaws, it was a hell of a lot of fun to play. And I'm putting it in S tier because, like, I really enjoyed it. Next we got Wario World. This one was also a bit of a mixed bag. They didn't throw everything they did previously into a bin and move on like they did going from 1 through 3 to 4. But this one definitely is less platformy and more focused on the combat, so it makes it kind of feel like a 3D beat 'em up in some ways. I don't mind that, and again, it was fun to play. But it is really hard to peg this one. The level design was pretty decent. Again, it was a bit short, but not as much as 4. There's a fair amount of replay value. Music was hit and miss, although I really hate the fact that if you pause the game, it starts playing that na-na-na-na track really loudly, and there's no way to mute it apart from muting your TV, so that was a dumb thing to do. I honestly wouldn't have minded seeing another Wario game made this way, like maybe for the Switch or the Wii U. But again, like, I don't know, I've seen people talk good about this one, and other people just hate it. I thought it was somewhere in the middle. Good, not great. Top B for me. Getting hard to play that one legitimately because, like a lot of GameCube games, there's just this price is just going up and up and up and up and up and up. So, if you can find one, maybe pick it for a reasonable price, pick it up. Otherwise, emulate it or play it on a hacked Wii U. It's worth playing, but not worth paying an exorbitant amount for. Oh boy, Master of Disguise. Kinda taking the Wario Land approach and turning it into a pseudo Metroidvania. The problem is the disguise system. Not necessarily a bad idea in theory, but the way it was executed was atrocious. instead of like hitting a button, you have to draw a stop and use the stylus to draw a symbol for what skies you want to use. The problem is, besides remembering what every single symbol is, you constantly have to fight it because the touchscreen recognition is atrocious, and even just drawing a circle around Wario's head to get the spaceman outfit can be a chore. So, if you had problems playing like Hourglass or Spirit Tracks, you will hate this game. Because again, I've spent so much time fighting the controls on this. Which, again, if it wasn't for that, I might put it as a low B, but just for the controls alone, I'm tempted to put it in D. Like, if they had to screw that up so hard, this would have been an alright game. And the fact that you have to play the same two stupid treasure minigames for every single chest you open makes me not want to go for completionism. I'm going to say a low C for that. It could have been good, but man, did they screw it up. Thankfully, that wasn't the last game in the Land series. And as a matter of fact, the next game, Wario Land Shake It. Oh boy, did this go from a low note to a high note. Great level design, excellent soundtrack, superb hand-drawn visuals. This one was made by Feelgood, the same people that did the two most recent Yoshi games, and Kirby's Epic Yarn. Well, you heard me have some words about Epic Yarn in the Kirby video. For the Yoshi games, I will get into a bit later, but Cliff Note, one is okay, the other one was really good. But for a developer that was kind of hit or miss, they knocked it out of the park with this one. It's a crying shame it didn't sell that well. It probably ended the Land franchise, but better to go out on an extreme high note than let it see itself just piss itself out into oblivion. It's just I would love to see a sequel to this. Maybe not a direct sequel, but a game made similarly. Honestly, the only complaints I have for this game are nitpicks. It is a bit short. The shaking mechanic does kind of break it up when you have to tilt the Wiimote up and shake it, because I will defend most motion controls on many occasions, but this is not one of them. This was just another waggle gimmick. Could have easily been done by a button, but thankfully it's not too intrusive since you're playing with the Wiimote sideways normally, and just tilting it up real quick isn't too big of a deal. Plus, you don't have to do it that often. But other than that, it's a superb game. Another S rank, probably the best on this entire list. You can still get it for cheap, so if you see it, get it and play it if you haven't already. If you like, whether because you like Wario games or because you like 2D platforms, it's almost a masterpiece. Now we ditch the platformers and get to the WarioWare games. These are also kind of hard to... Who's paying me? Are also hard to classify in general because you're playing shortened mini games as micro games, but it's kind of done in like a combination of a score attack with rhythm game mechanics. It sounds stupid on paper, but once you sit down and play it, it gets addicting. It probably doesn't help that my first experience was not the greatest, and I didn't understand it, but once I sat down, picked it up again, and played through the original game, yeah, I came to really like it, and I got addicted for a while. So speaking of that original game, it set the premise. It didn't have any special gimmicks since it was entirely button-based, but that's probably a good thing. It was a bit short, but these are meant to be replayed and go for higher scores, so all of these are short, but I won't hold it too much against it. I'm not sure where I'd put the original. I'm gonna smack someone. I want to say A, but it's also maybe a top B. Maybe bottom A. It hasn't really aged as well, and it's not as special as some of the later ones, but it set the tone, and it was a lot of fun to play. It's got me wanting to do it, so A it goes. The GameCube one was a bit of unfortunate. They just took the original and slapped it on a full price GameCube game. What's worse is they took the story mode out and replaced it with multiplayer components, so It's quite literally just score attack with the original mini micro games. Maybe if they had remastered it and touched up the visuals to look like a HD thing, that might have put it higher, but for just being a shameless ripoff, it goes in the D. Ooh, Twisted. I did not particularly enjoy this one that much. The main mechanic was twisting your Game Boy, and the suck part is like, because of that, the only ways to play this is with original hardware, and I mean original hardware because you cannot play this on a DS, or by using the MGBA emulator on a hacked 3DS. Those are the only two ways. I think there may be a ROM hack now to get rid of the motion mechanics and do it with buttons, but I could, like the Yoshi Topsy-Turvy game, but I could be wrong. It was creative. I'll give it that. I absolutely despise the boss micro game. That took me so many times to get right just to finish it. Micro games just aren't that fun. Some decent music. I'm gonna say C tier, better than the two games that are in C tier, but still C tier. Touched was a huge step up, though. I would say this was even better than the original. I'm kind of harsh on games that forge touchscreen controls because, unlike motion, those can really get in the way, especially since you're holding the system and the stylus at the same time. And I don't particularly like either scratching up the screen or getting fingerprints on it. But in this case, I'm willing to look past it because everything about it is almost top-notch. Good music, great visuals, goofy story. Micro games are a lot better than the previous two, for the most part. So, A tier above the original, not quite S, because the next one is the S. Smooth moves. Now, I will say that a couple of the micro games are your standard Wii waggle stuff, but most of them are used in a pretty creative way, and the Wiimote is responsive. Had one of the best soundtracks in the whole series. Great visuals. Kind of a pretty okay story for WarioWare games. My only complaint for it is, like, it can be hard to remember the different stances, and you constantly having to pause and watch the tutorial every time you see a new one. But minor flaw for otherwise great game. There's a decent amount of content. And again, the micro games are pretty well done. I had a blast playing this. So this is the S tier of the WarioWare games. Now the next one for the DS was DIY. This was a bit of a mixed bag. There is a full-fledged single-player mode, although there's no story behind it. But the problem is you have to unlock each character's course by getting into the game every day. Thankfully, you don't have to actually play it. You can just log in, turn it off. That's what I did until I unlocked all the single-player content before I actually sat down and played the damn thing. The built-in micro games are pretty alright. And this would probably go a lot harder for people that enjoyed playing and creating micro games. I didn't particularly like that, but I can't really be biased against it. I'm going to say that goes in maybe a low B. If it hadn't forced me to log in to unlock the full single-player mode and had a bit more beef behind the single-player mode, I'd probably put it a bit higher, though. Now, the Wii version DIY Showcase, this is made entirely for playing DIY micro games. Though there is a single-player mode. Unfortunately, there's only like 3 courses you can play. And not a whole lot of micro games. I get the feeling the amount of mileage you get for this one is entirely dependent on playing other people's micro games. But now that that function is shut down, the only way to get them is by... Actually, I'm not even sure if you can transfer between the DS and the Wii game directly, but I don't know. I'm going to say a low C for that one. Snapped. Oh, this was a mess. I will preface this by saying I only played this on my hack 3DS, so I don't know if it had problems recognizing the 3DS's camera to the original, but I could not get it to function at all properly. It would not read inputs at all. And on top of that, there's barely any content. There's no story mode, So you basically got a big thing of nothing. I know they were trying to do something different again, but they completely half-assed it, so that's our F tier. Don't play it at all. Just trust me on that. I have never once heard anyone say anything good about it, both from players and reviewers. Game & Wario is another mixed bag. It kind of... They tried, I guess, throwing the standard formula into a bin. And instead of playing a bunch of different microgames in succession in a rhythm fashion going for a high score, there's like 10 different... There's 10 different mini-games now. Not microgames, but mini-games. At least I think it was 10. There might have been a bit more or less. It's been a while since I played it. If this had been released at a budget price, like 30 or 40 as an eShop game, I'd probably be a bit kinder to it. But as a full-fledged game, it's kind of lacking. You can easily get through all the content in about a couple hours, like with the other Ware games. I don't know. I had fun playing it, but it doesn't have that replay value that the other ones have. Once you play all the micro games, you're probably gonna be done. But it did use the gamepad in interesting ways in some of them. Honestly, I feel this game could have been like just as much of a pack-in like Nintendo Land. Probably even better as a pack-in than that did, since that showcased the gamepad functionality a bit better. If you picked it up on a discount, I would say it's worth playing. Unfortunately, this is one of those Wii U games that's gotten skyrocketed in price. I got lucky and picked it up for like 40, which, yeah, is overpaying, but I wanted to collect the games. I'm going to say it's a C tier, probably between Twisted and Wario Land 2. Gold? Gold I have a hard time justifying. On one hand, it's a new game. They did boost the story mode a bit. And hearing Wario get full voice acting was pretty amusing. But the problem is half the micro games are recycled from the original, Twisted, and Touched. There are a fair amount of new ones, as are most of the boss games. And it is kind of nice that they tried blending all three styles together. For the most part it works, although the Twisted games can be problematic. Not so much as the original, but still. If there was less rehashed content, I'd probably be a bit higher, but I'm going to say this is a solid B. I think I had more fun with Wario World, but still, it's pretty alright. Definitely worth playing. Now, Get It Together was kind of a misunderstood... I don't want to say gem, but it was definitely a misunderstood good game. They brought back the old, well, I say old, but they continued the tradition of being rhythm-based score attack. But they did it with a twist. Instead of just doing it in kind of a first-person perspective, I guess, quickly doing a micro game, what you do is you'd set up a team of 3 with different characters from the WarioWare series. And each character had their own method of movement and, in some cases, attacking. And every single game is compatible with every single character. So, depending on what games you were playing, you could either give yourself a great boon or hinder yourself depending on your team composition, because you didn't get to select which character you used per game. It would be random. Which can kind of screw a score attack run, or a high score run, but it also does shake it up a fair amount. And not only that, it's fully playable in co-op. I can see why they didn't do online for it, since lag would probably be an issue, but I did play this co-op with my fiance a while back, and we had a lot of fun. Of course, playing alone is still fun. There's still a decent amount of content, and I like the fact that there's a short post-game story mode going through the challenges, the challenge towers, compared to the other games where it's just from start to finish, basically just go for a high score, and that's the only reason to play them. So I'm gonna say, you know what, that's a low A. Fully recommend giving it a try. My only issue is probably both it and Move It were a bit overpriced. I do think they should have been 40. Now, I do have to, even though Wario Land did it on a high note, and I'm really wishing they would bring it back, I don't think the series is ending per se, but the last game we've gotten, I kind of have a like-hate relationship with it. For one thing, I don't like Wario's new voice actor very much. For another, I know that's a nitpick, but they could have found someone better. Like, they could have got the guy that does the I'm forklift certified. Probably done a better job than that. Anyways, enough ragging on his voice. It's pretty similar to Smooth Moves. The problem is number one, you're using both Joy-Cons. And the other problem is unlike with Smooth Moves, the system has trouble registering your inputs. Now, I'll grant you I played this sitting, so that might have been a me problem. You're supposed to do it standing, but fuck that. So, I was fighting with the controls a lot. There are some decent micro games, and the story mode's pretty standard for a WarioWare game. The music was okay. The presentation overall was decent, but again, just fighting with the controls so much brings what could have been a great follow-up to Smooth Moves down from a B or even a low A all the way down to maybe top C. Yeah, I would still pick it up on a discount, but don't get it for full price. Unless you like fighting with the controls. Anyways, I sincerely hope they give us a new WarioWare game at some point. I'm sure they will for the Switch 2 or whatever it is. I hope if they do another Joy-Con waggling game, they get the controls down a bit better so I'm not fighting with it as much, then maybe we will see a true smooth sequel. And fingers crossed for a proper Land game, even if it's not a follow-up to Shake It. Even if we get something like Wario World, I'd be pretty okay with. I just pray we don't go back to Wario Land 2 and 3 mechanics. Anyways, hope this one wasn't too controversial, though I'm sure there's some people that will be offended by my placement of 3. But let's see what we get from the series in the future. Hopefully it's something good and we can end, and when Move truly does stop, we can end it on a higher note. But we'll see.